Non-metallic gold. For some, the literal holy grail of miniature painting. For others, something that we do every now and again to flex those hobby muscles and to create content for a video. Is this an easy technique? Yeah, in the way that it doesn't require you to be like stood on your head while you do miniature painting. It doesn't require you to buy any extra tools, and it usually doesn't require you to buy many extra paints either. So from that perspective, yeah, it's pretty straightforward at least. In this video, I'm going to show you how I paint non-metallic gold. And spoiler alert, to paint any non-metallic thing, start with a dark color, work up to an almost white highlight, put your shadows back in, and along the way, do smaller and smaller highlights. That's kind of it. Thanks for watching. See you in the streams. Seriously though, it's not much more than that. It does require some practice and it does require some patience, but you have the facility to learn every single time you pick up a paintbrush or pull the airbrush trigger. We're going to focus on 3 areas of this miniature. We have got a nice flat panel, we have got a couple of rings, and we have got a skeletal face that's kind of stretched and elongated. It's definitely not an ammo ejection port. But that's what we're going to be doing. I really enjoyed making this video and I hope you guys really enjoy watching it. If you do, you know what to do. This. That's right. That. So, let's get to it. So this is your paint list. Burnt Umber from Vallejo Model Air, Morrow White from P3 or Any Good White, Flashkit Yellow, and Nagaroth Night from G-Dubs. Before I chose to do this in a non-metallic fashion, I was originally going to do it in a standard true metallic metal style. However, because nothing else on the miniature had a true metallic at all to it anymore, it just didn't really look right. So I figured we'd do non-metallic metal. We're using Vallejo Burnt Umber from their Model Air range. To be honest, this is not the best paint to use for a base coat. It's very thin, as are all the air paints, and this is why I don't suggest anyone buy the Model Air range as an entire range. If all you're ever going to do is airbrush, by all means go for it, but it means that they're pretty terrible for anything else. So just buy the regular paints, thin them down as you need, and use those through your airbrush when you need to. But essentially, the reason I'm using it is because it is a fantastic reddish brown color. You could get away with Rhinoxide from GW, that's a little bit too red, and it's a little bit too dark. Essentially though, find something that's got this particular hue and use this as the base for all of your metallics. Non-metallics. Definitely non-metallics. You could use it as a metallic base though. That'd be fine too. So for our first set of highlights, we're taking some yellow and mixing that straight in to our burnt umber. We want to make sure we've got something that's a nice departure from that. So just a little bit of a step up. Like I said at the very start of the video, a lot of non-metallic metal is essentially just applying smaller highlights of a brighter color. For gold, for instance, I tend to add enough yellow till we get to the point where we're working with just yellow, and then start adding white until we're almost at the point where we're adding in just white. Now with these sections, we want to create a highlight towards the top of our flat panels. So we went from a position with the brush towards the bottom part of it and then moved the paint upwards towards the top section. The reason we're doing it that way around is so that we're getting our paint at the thickest point at the termination of our brush strokes, which is where we want our highest highlight to be. So with all of our brush strokes, we're starting to work upwards towards that area. We'll keep doing that throughout the entirety of this video. As we continue to work on the edges though, because obviously just as I've now said, work upwards, we'll of course be working down for some of the edge highlights part of it, but meh. For things like the skull, work towards the top section like I just said. So continue to bring all of your highlights upwards. So on the face, you're getting the lower part of the orbital around the eye, the forehead, all that sort of thing. And then just keep adding in more and more yellow as you go. So again, we're going to be taking this, making sure our highlight is the right consistency, working towards the top part of our flat areas, and just building that highlight up. Basically, because gold is metallic yellow, you're working towards a nice rich buttery yellow. If you were doing something like brass, then you'd want to get a little bit more white in there a little earlier on. You probably wouldn't want quite as dark of a base color for it. If you're working with copper, you'd maybe add in a little bit more red and so on. Rose gold, make it a little pink. You can think about the different kinds of gold, and you could do loads of work to try and replicate those kind of feelings and those kind of like finishes to gold. But essentially for this, we're looking for a nice buttery gold color. So again, we continue to paint our highlights on nice and small, a little bit smaller each time as we go. All you've got to do is keep repeating these steps until eventually you get to a point where, like I said, you stop working with just yellow and start adding white in, and that's where your highlights get really small. All right, this is the last time we're adding just yellow to our highlight mix. Now you can see we're almost working with pure flash gitch. There's a little of that previous mix in it, and we are making sure we keep that paint nice and thin. Remember, if you haven't seen this video, how to thin your paint properly, you should probably watch that before attempting this technique. Just go to the part in there you're looking for highlights and blending, watch those two sections, and then give this a go. Now, if you have liked this video and maybe you enjoyed that one as well, there's a couple of other places that you can come and see me in action. You can come and join in over on Twitch, where you can watch 4 shows a week where we stream. You can ask questions and get answers in real time. You can also come and join in over on Patreon, where you get videos like this every 2 weeks. And in fact, there's a companion video to this one where I show you how to paint the backdrop that we did for this guy and do anything like that that you want to do to jazz up your own miniatures. I'd also like to thank the following Patreons who've been absolute bosses and helping to keep the lights on here: Oliver Brooks, Alexander Barland, Florian Botcher, Frank T, Jamie Payton, John Scrivens and Patrick Klein, Dean Blackener, Jays B73 Bryant, Reese Fuller, Jet6R6, NME, Ryan Burke, and Raven Kane. Thank you to every single one of you. Now, let's add some white into this and really pop out those highlights. You can see we'll be going on with a very, very small highlight here. We're just keeping it to the very edges of everything that we've got. When you're doing highlights like this, you want to be sure that you're just getting that bit that light would just kind of hit. It's just that sort of little glint that you get. Also, because of this is the first time we're putting on some secondary reflections. So look at the bottom of this little square, this little oblong. Now, we're just making sure we're putting a light reflection on there. This does 2 things. It helps to sell the effect of the non-metallic metal, but it also helps to enhance the level of detail. Adding that there keeps everything nice and sharp. Let's add some more white and really snap those out. So as you can see, we're adding in more white. Now, this highlight is a little bit thicker in terms of our paint consistency than our previous highlights have been. This is because we're not really looking to do any kind of blending with this. This is us getting to the edges and really just snapping everything into place. You saw me a second ago put that little highlight at the bottom part of this. This is a similar thing to that. It's just really defining those edges for us and really just enhancing that detail so all of it stands out. As before, keep your highlights slightly smaller than the previous one and keep building these up in terms of intensities, the amount of white that goes into your highlight each time, just a little at a time. If you go with too large of a step change, you'll end up with something that is very jarring and either has a very sort of stylized appearance or is in a position where there's a lot of like really bright lights that are pinpointing certain areas of it. Equally, if you create too much of a gap between your highlight and your shadow, you'll end up with something that has the same kind of not quite right appearance. So a lot of the legwork in painting non-metallic metals is getting the balance right, how fast you can go up through your highlights, how much shadow you need to leave, how quickly you need to move through highlights on certain areas, certain different kinds of curved surfaces. There's a lot to learn painting using this technique, and it is something that you really do need to put some time and effort and practice in on. However, if you're someone that's already putting a lot of time brush blending and making things that have gradients across a surface, a lot of the techniques here will kind of be familiar to you. You'll be doing exactly the same thing, but instead of going from, say, dark red to light red, you're going from basically just go from, say, a dark brown to a light yellow. With these sort of highlights, you want to make sure, though, that you are just hitting the edges when you get to your final highlights. Just popping those last little bits on there, here and there, is what really, really makes it work. And just here, you'll see me put a very, very small highlight to really just define the top part of that skull there. Without that, it didn't quite work, and it was only till I saw it in that last moment that I realized that was what it was missing. We're adding in some more white now, and we're pretty much down to our final highlights. So let's go really, really bright and add in a bit more, actually. So we've got what's almost white at this point in time. There's very little extra color to it, and this is where we really just put on the smallest highlights. This is that final glint of light. So imagine this is the final part where light has struck the object. Is the brightest highlight of it. You don't need to do all of it, and frequently you'll just be doing some tiny dots. It is important at this stage though to have maximum separation between colors. So here on the top and bottom parts of like the jawline of the skull there, we've just put this tiny dot right down towards the end, and just at the end there's a little bit of darkness that helps to separate everything. That massive step change that you get there, the massively high contrast, is what makes this really, really work. Now we're finally using that purple, we're mixing it with some of our burnt umber, and this we're turning into a glaze. So if you've watched that Thin Your Paints video properly, you'll understand how glazing works. Get this nice and thin, and then paint this over some of the area that you want your darkest point to be. So here you saw, for instance, we just used a little bit of this in the bottom left corner of that, just to start bringing a harder, darker shadow to that area. Don't do all of it. Because it's a glaze, you will get some separation, and you'll just get a nice gradient across the board. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've got a little surprise for you guys. I made a little bit of a music video, which you'll see coming on screen very shortly. Then there's the as usual B-roll, and then some outtakes, because my brain was having trouble today. I felt that I had to do this in a non-metallic version of gold as well. So as you can see, we're painting this with a paint. Okay, dickhead. Enjoy, and then after this and the as usual sexy B-roll, you will find some outtakes, because today my brain was not braining. Thanks for everyone for watching. That one will go in the outtakes. Dickhead. Think me, just had a pig. Look. Be right back.